was about that time of year for Nebraska to have an off-season twist, and off-season twist we got. Evan Cooper, of course, yesterday resigning his position as the defensive backs coach. Again, I didn't record a video yesterday on that, just out of respect for Evan Cooper and the situation, just wanting to let all the details come out first before I begin to speculate on anything. So I'm just going to, still continue to let those details come out. I'll give you my thoughts on everything in the replacement of John Butler, who John Butler I'm familiar with a little bit from his time with the Texans as a big-time Texans fan. So I'm going to dive into his past and a little deep dive into what I think is going to make him work really well for this team, and where I think he fits in terms of culture and his style of leadership on this team as well. So first things first, my name is Justin Adams. If you're new here, please consider leaving a like or dropping a comment, as it really helps me out. So I appreciate everybody's support here. And yeah, let's go ahead and dive right into Mr. John Butler. So now here's a little bit of his prior background. And as you can see down here, one of the things that I did want to point out, Texas, his stint here with Texas down at the bottom in 97 and 98. Now, he was a graduate assistant during that time. Now, the reason I bring up that time is because one of the important things that he has spoken about in the past was being 24 as a grad assistant for Texas, and that, transition from Makovich to Mac Brown, 4-7 his first year as a grad assistant there, to 9-3 in that team with Ricky Williams. And he said that was one of the most influential parts of his career at a very young age, because he was able to see both sides of the spectrum in a very short amount of time. He was able to see the downside, and then he was able to see the kind of upside and the uptick in that reversal. So he does, in a very early age, in a very early tenure in his career, have experience in a developmental transitional type of program. And the fact that stood out to him so much, I think he carries a lot of that with him, and it comes across in the way he speaks and the way he operates today. So, he just kind of said it was one of those he'll never forget, because he lived it, and it was the most influential moment of his career. So you do have to think that that's something that he still talks about to this day, that carries over with him to today. And I think that is a little key piece into, a little bit of why maybe he fits in a transitional type of team. Now, another thing to note, he does have Big Ten experience, as you've probably seen. So 2012, 2013 with Penn State, ranked second in the Big Ten and 16th nationally in scoring defense as a secondary coach. Sorry, can't talk. And then, of course, they added the defensive coordinator title in 2013. Now, that defensive coordinator title is something that, has been talked about, because one of the main reasons why he left Buffalo, as you've probably seen by now, was because he really wanted to bet on himself. And, once a defensive coordinator was hired in Buffalo, he didn't see the opportunity for himself to be able to move into the next step. So he and the Bills mutually agreed to part ways, and he kind of, like I said, bet on himself, and he was willing to take a lateral move, willing to take a step back for a potential to step into a place where he had the opportunity to move up. And of course, Nebraska, with Tony White where he is, and being as good of a coach as he is, could move on at any point in any offseason. And you got to think that John Butler is probably in a great place, if he can come in and do the job well, which I expect him to do, to be able to take, at least have a shot at that role. So, and I like this because I've totaled a couple cars in my life. But he wrecked two cars on two occasions trying to park them for the lot. So fun fact there. All right. And another thing to note, of course, you see that he had his time with the Texans right there. So he had his time with Penn State, secondary coach, and then defense coordinator tag in 2013, and then moved over to the Texans. Now, with his time with the Texans, he was over there from 14 to 17, and over there they had the likes of Jonathan Joseph, Kareem Jackson, AJ Boye, Andre Howell during that period. That was their defensive backfield for the most part during that period. Now, J. Joe and Kareem Jackson, we of course know how good they were and are. AJ Boye was the one that was interesting to me, because AJ Boye was very much a guy who had a fast development under John Butler, and then kind of peaked in 2017 and 2018. 2017, of course, was AJ Boye's last year with the Texans. Same year was John Butler's last year with the Texans. and then went over to 2018, and AJ Boye had his best season 2017, 2018, and then kind of regressed after that. Now, that could be due to a number of things, but I do know that he did develop very, very well and above what people expected him to under Butler. So I do remember that from being a Texans fan. Now, moving forward to a little bit of what, the team and what players have had to say about him, and just in hearing him talk back in the day, and he's a very effective communicator, right? And every player who has talked about it has said that, he's a great leader, great communication style. Levi Wallace saying, quote, he's rare. And that's what he meant by that. He's rare in terms of he is a no nonsense coach, right? You have to buy into his way and his style, very much like Matt Rule. And he only wants people there who are going to try to be better. And it was quoted as he only wants players there who are going to invest in themselves or put the effort into investing in themselves. So you can already see kind of the parallels and where he kind of connects in his style with Matt Rule and the philosophies and what he believes. Also, the players talked about how he wants to be the guy in the fire making the decisions. Like I said before, he's very much a go-getter type of guy, but there's certain people in this world that want the pressure on their shoulders, right? There's certain people in the world, pressure makes diamonds is a quote I like to say all the time. Pressure makes diamonds is a great quote because you start to realize who wants that, who welcomes that, who wants the decision making put on their shoulders because they trust their own decision making so much that they can stand behind it. If they make a mistake, they're still going to answer to it and they're going to be able to stand behind it. That is a confidence that you have to be able to make it in this, coaching world as a defensive coordinator, especially. And he kind of is at the point where he's just like, I have, been a defensive backs coach for long enough, and I want to move somewhere where I have an opportunity for growth. And Nebraska seemed to be that place. Of course, Tony White being as great as he is, of course, if he moves on, it's going to be because he gets a head coaching job somewhere. So he would be able to step into that role if he can come in and succeed. Now, of course, he's got a lot of proving himself to do before we go ahead and give him the defensive coordinator title. But having a guy in here who has NFL experience and has glowing superlatives of all the coaches and players that he's played on or that have played under him and that he's coached, even after his departure says a lot about a guy, because you have a lot of people and players who will blame or go after a guy after they leave. And there's not one player that I've seen that has gone after him in any kind of negative way or had a negative thing to say about him, which is very similar to Evan Cooper. But they're both hard-nosed coaches. They're both very physical, coaches. They want the things done their way, but they care about the kids. They care about the athletes. And that's the most important thing. And that's what's going to make these players gravitate towards him and want to grow and want to stay and become great young men, is they're going to see his vision. And he does a great job of communicating his vision. Go watch one interview of John Butler and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. He's very direct to the point and he knows what he wants from his guys. And that is something that's going to be evident. And, this defensive back room is in great hands. Again, losing Evan Cooper, got to say it for what it is, hurts. But Nebraska did about as good as they could have in terms of what happened, what went down. And you got to think on the back end, of course, Matt Rule and company had to know about this to be able to turn around and get this decision done this quickly. So going through his time, with the Bills. So the defense there was, first in passing yards per game, first in yards per attempt, first in touchdowns allowed, first in opponent passing rating, first in passing first downs, first in ADOT, which is average depth of target, second in completion percentage, second in air yards allowed per completion, and fifth in yards per catch. So what he did at Buffalo and the fact that he was unemployed again had nothing to do with his performance. His performance everywhere has been good. The Bills in 2021, they finished the season as the number one total defense, to 272.8 yards per game, as you can see up there at the top, and 17 points per game. So, having a level of Big Ten experience like he has, having a level of NFL experience like he does, goes a long way. Not only in terms of his prowess as a coach in terms of the grand scheme of college football, but NFL experience is something that players and recruits value very well. And in his time there, he was with the Texans, I believe, at the same time Mike Vrabel was. He talks about Mike Vrabel as a friend. Mike Vrabel, knows his kids and stuff or his daughter and stuff like that. So he, of course, Sean McDermott, they both went to the same high school. So he has connections in the NFL too. And that's also going to bode well for Nebraska and in recruiting and stuff like that, because as we know, these connections do pay dividends, and especially the look and idea of what these recruits are how they're going to better themselves for the future. They want somebody who knows how to get them and take them to the next level. And a lot of people knew Evan Cooper was a guy who could do that. People know for a fact John Butler is a guy who can do that. People also know for a fact John Butler is a guy who has been a top defensive backs coach at the NFL level. And that's going to go a long way for recruiting. So I do think in a way that, again, Nebraska has done about as well as they could in turning this around into a really, really good hire, turning a bad situation into somewhat of a manageable situation. And again, wait and see. We'll see how it plays out for him. I don't want to, say everything's perfect too soon. Now, as time goes along, we're going to start to see the fruits of the labor pay off. And if Matt Rule trusts in him and John Butler, and if Matt Rule handpicked him and had this ready to rock and roll, I think Butler is a guy that fits exactly into what Matt Rule's philosophies are in just every single way. He is a great talker. He's a great leader of men. He can coach his tail off. He knows football. He knows schematics. And listen to him talk. His football mind is next level. He has developed the likes of, like I said, AJ Boye and those types of guys. You got Tre'Davious White, Poyer, Damar Hamlin spoke highly of him. Damar Hamlin basically said like he's one of the main reasons that Damar was able to make it into the NFL, because he was like, he raised him in the NFL is what he said. And so he was one of the biggest things and reasons that he became a pro and his growth as a pro is Damar Hamlin. So again, everybody has nothing but good things to say about him. He is a coach that, when asked, kind of about what he does outside of there, he's just like, he likes to hang out with his kid. And so he's a very simple, but he's just football oriented. His life is football. He wants to be the guy. He wants to work himself back to being the guy. So this is a guy that's going to come in immediately and work his butt off to prove himself to not only the fan base, but to the staff and to everybody. And not only that, but he bet on himself. And I'll tell you one thing, somebody who takes a risk to bet on themselves is somebody who's probably not going to fail, because you taking a risk, of that magnitude, you resigning or kind of mutually agree to part ways from your position to go unemployed, to be able to potentially take a move over to give you a better opportunity to work yourself into a defensive coordinator position, not just because you want to wait for a defensive coordinator position, but you come on to prove yourself to become a defensive coordinator. That is a guy that I trust in. That is a guy that I believe in. And again, with Evan Cooper being gone, this situation can only be so positive. But again, I think with the situation that Nebraska was handed, they did the best that they possibly could. And I think this hire right here is an excellent, excellent hire that Nebraska fans will be pleasantly surprised about. And lastly, just hoping again that as we find out more about Evan Cooper, that everything that comes to light is positive and that everything's well with him and his family, and that there's no negatives out of this from either side. And here's to hoping that the Texans, Nebraska doesn't miss a beat on moving, and the Texans. I hope the Texans don't miss a beat either. But I don't think Nebraska will miss too much of a beat here with Butler. Now, the biggest thing to kind of rekindle that Butler doesn't have that Evan Cooper has is there is a style of communication that Matt Rule and staff have that is very unique to them, right? There's a culture that they have. Now, Butler has to really come in and learn these things. Evan Cooper already knew these things coming in. So there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for Butler. But with a guy like he is that wants to come in and prove himself, he came onto this team, and him and Matt Rule had a discussion. You know, he knows exactly what Matt Rule wants, what Matt Rule's vision is here. You know, they discussed this. You know, he's bought in. And if Matt Rule trusts him, we should trust him as well. And yeah, like I said, just all around great hire. We'll see if he also gets the passing game coordinator title. That remains to be seen. But he did have that at Buffalo as well. So on top of the defensive back. So we'll see what he can do in terms of not only recruiting, but what he can do in terms of, you know, rallying the troops and see what kind of guy we got in John Butler now in 2024. But it is nice to see John Butler again coaching one of my teams, because I did love him as a coach back then, and I'm excited to see what he does at Nebraska with this defensive back room. So I'll continue to cover more on this story as information becomes available. But I appreciate everybody checking out this video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.